we're going to do a poll and check out the consumer perception or acceptance of these different cultivated products, and we'll discuss the results with our guests after I introduce each of them. So first of all, we have so everybody in the audience, please start voting now on the side. I keep feeling like it's a mirroring thing. So like it's on your right side. You'll see the poll, and then you can vote there. So let me do a quick introduction of our guests today. First of all, we have Kerry Chen, founder of the first cultivated meat company in Hong Kong. I still remember a meeting with Carrie around this time 2 years ago at a Starbucks. I just started at GFI back then, and Carrie literally just incorporated Avant meat and hasn't even quit her corporate job back then. And who would have guessed 2 years later, here I am, here you are. And the pilot product focus of Avant meat is fish. Then we have Dr. Ling, co-founder of Shiok Meats, the first cultivated meat company in Singapore. Kai's background is in stem cell biology, and the pilot product focus of Shiok Meats is shrimp. Last but not least, we have Fengru, founder of TurtleTree Labs from Singapore. TurtleTree Labs is the first biotech company in the world with the ability to create milk from all mammals. That's super exciting. We're going to hear all about this in the next hour. So using their proprietary cell-based methods, TurtleTree Labs aim to shape the future of not just how to get dairy milk, but how humans feed their infants. So can't wait to hear more about that from you. Let's see if we have the poll results. So basically, if you vote, our guests as well, like you can vote. Once you vote, you will see the poll results. So let me just vote in each of these as well so that I can see what's the result we have. So let's see. The reason I was like sort of asking these questions is because, people talk about kind of consumer acceptance of cultivated meat in general or cultivated products in general. But as the sector grows, and as you know, because all of you ladies here are doing very different products, right? Nobody's doing a piece of steak here. And so we are still beyond that. And I think talking about consumer acceptance in a vacuum is not very helpful. I think a lot of consumer perception acceptance also comes from like, what kind of products are we talking about? So let's have a look at the poll and discuss around that. So let's see, cultivated beef steak will try. 86% of people will try this. Cultivated cheese, 94% of people will try this. Cultivated fish steak, 78%. So that's quite similar. Steel line made with cell-based shrimp and plant-based pork, which is what I tried. Was it a year ago, Kai, when you had the press conference and I tried that? That is the hybrid product of plant-based pork and cell-based shrimp. That was an awesome.
That was about it's about a year ago, a few months ago. Yeah.
Oh God, time flies. And then we have infant formula with high-value components extracted from cultivated human breast milk. That's a mouthful. We have 42% there, but we will talk to Fengru more about like what this is about, because I don't think people can even grasp the idea of what it is, right? So we'll talk more about that. And then I added cultivated sashimi, which got 75% will try. Okay, 74% will try. I put it in there because that is my startup idea, or someone should grasp that and run with it. I keep thinking that someone should do sashimi, like that there is a, sorry, I'm like selling my idea now. This is my little pitch. Because raw fish is not cooked and you can't get rid of the bacteria, etc. Like all the bad stuff that comes from fish otherwise, right? There's no way to do a cleaner version than a cultivated version of it. So we'll see one day, sashimi. So what do you guys think about the poll results? Like, is there anything that is surprising you? Should we start with Kai?
Sure, happy to start. Very happy to be here. When I heard Elaine was organizing this, I'm very happy to be here with Carrie and Fengru, sharing about our experience. About the results, I think it's all very positive and very exciting. So glad that so many people are very interested in what we do and looking forward to the products in the market. Over here, I feel like this audience is probably very familiar with cell-based products, so that's kind of a good
Yeah.
reason that we see as well from people. The more they know about it, the more they're interested and very excited to try these products.
Well, along that line, can I then ask Fengru to share a bit more about, so number 5, I think, so that is the thing that people know less about, right? Can you explain to us like where TurtleTree is at with the development of a product like this?
Sure. So when we look at the entire dairy market, because our technology is quite powerful, it's a platform that can create milk from all mammals. So that includes cows, sheep, goats, and even humans. So when we look at the highest impact or the fastest growing market, it would be the infant nutrition market. And diving down into human milk, currently, if you look at infant formula today, it's really a blend of vegetable extracts, of bovine powder, of different things that are trying to replicate what is in human milk. So because our technology is able to produce the entire composition of human milk, there are some high value components that we can extract out at first and integrate that, upgrade the existing infant formula, and slowly, component by component, we will increase the nutrition profile of infant formula, and that's how we want to start going to market with first.
Yeah, that's extremely interesting. I think because I wanted to like dive deeper with Fengru on this also because like I see a lot of reports about, people just like get a headline like human breast milk and they don't really understand what this is about and why and the nuances of it, right? So from what you just said, like, and that's the thing about why people now think that, it's better to feed infants breast milk versus infant formula is because like the nutrition profile in infant formula is really missing those like unique components that you can really find in human breast milk. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So that's right. So especially breastfeeding, right? I'm not a mom, but I've talked to a lot of doctors, a lot of experts in this space. When it comes to breastfeeding, there is no better option. You should breastfeed if you can, because there's lots of antibodies, a lot of the microbiome that is passed from mother to child when the baby is latching. So we're talking to some doctors, local hospital, KK hospital here, and they are even against trying to pump milk from the breast and then bottle feeding the child. You really should have the skin-to-skin contact because it really builds a stronger bond between mother and child, and that's important to pass on the antibodies. So this is not something that we're trying to replace. What we're trying to do is we want to give moms what is second best. The fact is mothers who exclusively breastfeed at 6 months stands at less than 1%. So we want to be able to give mothers who can't breastfeed the second best for their babies.
Yeah, so Carrie, let me switch to you a little bit about the poll results. And you can talk more about like how or why did you decide to focus on fish as well?
Yeah, for the why we focus on fish, I think there are for animal in the sea, they have a slightly different problem than animal on the land. Animal on the land, we're concerned about the greenhouse gas, we're concerned about they taking up too much space, etc., or using too much fresh water. But on the other hand, animals in the sea, they have another set of problem in the consumer perspective at least. We're concerned about heavy metal, we're concerned about microplastic. That wasn't a problem 10 years ago or more. When we grew up, we didn't even heard about it, and now we unconsciously have been eating quite a bit of those without even knowing. So because of the polluted ocean, etc., that would be a problem. So there definitely will be the need for alternative, not to mention that the number of fish in the oceans are decreasing every year, and and the demand is growing on the other hand. So there definitely need for an alternative source. And in terms of the result, I think I think the majority of people would like to try, and some maybe. I think it would be down to the dish maybe. And I have a suggestion that make it like deep fried fish and chips, because I mean anything deep fried would be tasty. So I think at the end of the day, it will be the flavor, the taste, the texture of the dish that will attract people, and of course on top of that, sustainability, purity, etc. That will be really the important factor as well.
So I just saw that actually the product with the highest vote of will try, 92%, is actually cultivated cheese. So this is a really great way to launch into Fengru's personal story journey into why did you found TurtleTree? It all started with your passion in cheese, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, so my background a little bit, I've always worked for tech companies. I worked for Salesforce and Google. But many years ago as a hobby, I liked to make cheese because cheese in Asia is just so expensive. And I thought, yeah, why not try to do it? So that picture there was actually me in Vermont, in the US, learning how to make cheese over several weeks. It was a fun thing, and I wanted to replicate that back in Asia. So I went to Indonesia, I went to Thailand to try to find good raw milk to make my cheese. But then I started to dive into the industry and realized that there were lots of contract farming. There were lots of problems with antibiotics that are being pumped into the cows. As a result, the milk quality is always suffering, and the quality of my cheeses are just not as good as back in Vermont. So I was quite disappointed at the result. And back then I was working for Google, and that was when I met my co-founder Max. He was the CEO of a previous company, and he was at Google sharing about the future of all technologies. And some of the interesting technologies that he shared was companies like Memphis Meats and Blue Nalu, who are using cells to make meat and seafood. So they are really the pioneers of the industry. I was really excited. I thought I could find a similar company making milk and get them to come to Singapore. So I talked to him after the talk. But back then there was no other companies doing it, and we decided to get on this journey ourselves. Scientists did a lot of research, filed our patents last year, and here we are today.
So you are going to, like, when are you going to launch your cheese? Like, what is the priority there? Like, I want to know what I'm just going about and trying everyone's food, right? Like, when is your next prototype going to come out, and I'll be there?
So we were supposed to have a media day event earlier this year, but COVID happened. So we will have one again. We'll try to set one up again by Q2 or Q1 next year, depending on the situation. But really, our go-to-market strategy is working with the Dannons, the Mead Johnsons, to enable them to source milk through our methods. And because the cells are the factories that create the milk, they can create the entire composition of the milk. It's not just the whey, it's not just the fat, but the entire composition. And that is so important for the creation of the high-value products like cheese, butter, and yogurt. And that's why we are doing this through this method.
Yeah, and we'll dive deeper into the whole, like, collaborating with corporates and kind of partnerships in the sector a little bit later. So while we're talking about my food tasting journey, let's go to this. I got so many pictures taken of me just like have my mouth full, trying different food. So this is the press conference that thank you, Carrie, for inviting me. So we are trying your first prototype there. This is, again, super interesting. Like, the products that you are coming up with, especially Carrie, like the first thing was fish maw. I know that, like, you have like a much more diverse product range now, but what kind of really fascinated me at that point in time, that was again like a year ago. You coming up with fish maw, which is, if some of the audience don't know, it's basically you just eat that for like keeping your skin young. Like, you don't really eat it because you're hungry. Like, it is completely like a food medicine thing. And I just think it just takes takes a Chinese woman to actually come up with this product idea. So I think that is like super special. And I kind of want to follow up on I mean, Carrie, like feel free to like share your story with us. Also, you were just saying about the seafood, you know, all the issues that go with seafood. I'm wondering, is it more difficult to sell the seafood story compared to, let's say, beef, right? Because that was talked about so much in the media. You know, everybody now knows that like kind of production of beef is very bad for the environment, etc. It is not talked about that much in seafood, and seemingly a lot of people are still trying to find some more sustainable way, or more effective way of doing aquaculture. So how are you finding that, like how selling that like alternative seafood story?
Yeah, so for beef or land animal, a couple of factors I have mentioned like early on. The other aspect is that land animals, a lot like mammals, like avian chicken, and we are human beings, and we actually feel closer to them because we can see them smile, we can actually. And for fish, that is really lacking that aspect, except for we do have people supporting what we do. They are like divers. They go to the sea and see, like they swim with the fish, and then they really find that the marine system is so beautiful, and it's so sad to see that the ecosystem are really kind of depleted by various overfishing, etc. So I think that aspect maybe not as easily sell like on the emotional side to the consumers, but of course on the other more like health concern, I think there are definitely a lot of factors consumer will consider, like what I've just mentioned, contamination, heavy metal, plastic, etc. And in terms of the product that we first come up with, yeah, indeed that was for us. When we started the team, we actually think about, okay, what kind of meat do we want? So this is the first question. When you start, anyone who's going to start a cultivated meat company or cultivated cell egg company, people will gonna ask you, so what do you make? So we asked ourselves, okay, what do we make? I still remember like discussing with Mama, what do we make? And then we look at what had been done already. So quite a lot of company working on different mammalian species. So we're thinking that, okay, let's not duplicate on the scientific progress already. There have been a lot of efforts. And so on the grand scheme of things, we should actually work on something a bit different. And of course, there are a few companies already working on fish, but then in this area, there are actually less research on fish. So we see that there will be, but enough research in order to support us to start our R&D and do quite a bit of development to begin with. So we think that, okay, let's think about that, and also the environmental consideration that I've just mentioned. And of course, the other thing is that Asia, in Hong Kong here, for your information, the global average of consuming seafood and fish is about 20-something kilogram per person per year. And China is over 40 kg per person per year, so already double. And guess what is the number of Hong Kong?
Hong Kong always make the #1 in the world in these things. Like, what is that?
Yeah, we will be like feeling very guilty. It's actually over 70 kg, which is more than triple of the global average. So there's definitely a lot of seafood we consume here, many different kinds. And we see that in the future, there will be also a lot of potential product ideas, different kind of fish. So we're working with fish maw. We're also working on grouper mussel, so we can also make fish fillet. So that's also very interesting for us. And so that's the reason we decided to start with fish. And the pilot product, we think that it appeals to obviously quite a bit part of the market, which is female, maybe, but I would guess now also the other gender as well, who are concerned about like high quality protein, collagen, etc. So that's the initial idea. We are now having a platform of different kind of fish species and cell type as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up, because like once I wasn't aware of that crazy figure from Hong Kong. Oh my God. But at GFI, like we're definitely starting to look at it. Like we now have a whole team looking at alternative seafood. exactly because of that. Like we're seeing that for a lot of different reasons, whether people are switching, from meat to seafood and fish because of health reason, etc. That and also people kind of starting to understand the sustainability issues with meat, and then they switch to fish and switch to seafood. But of course, there is like very serious sustainability issue in that space as well. So we're seeing definitely, that's why we're spending a lot more resources now on research, etc., into the alternative seafood space. Definitely that is going to be the next big thing. So finally, I want to then also, like you started with shrimp as well, again now diversifying into other species. So let me pull up, I love this picture of Thai. I was 2008, right?
Yeah, really long ago. I was still in college.
You don't look that much older though. Like,
We all preserve well. We need to eat more fish more.
So, so first of all, you started with shrimp. Like, she only started with shrimp. I think you're now doing other product lines as well. Please tell us more about it, and also your perspective of looking at seafood and whether that's been more difficult than if you were doing beef, for instance. Where do you see this?
Sure. Sounds good. I can comment a little bit about how I got started and what this picture actually means. This was me in college, and then with a bunch of other friends, we organized the World Stem Cell Summit. Basically, Wisconsin, where I did my college and my PhD, was where I got exposed to stem cells and loved this idea that cells can actually keep dividing in the right conditions. But back then, we were all focused on the medical side and saving lives, making organs, but till now, that's still some way to go. And I'm very happy that everyone here has made use of all this work that has been done for many decades to use it for food, because that's really a huge issue that we are all facing right now. And also to be able to know where your food comes from is very important. With regards to starting with shrimp, now we're also doing crab and lobster. Hopefully we'll have a prototype tasting, or at least a showcase sometime end of this year for lobster. Really excited about that.
Can I
yeah,
need to
definitely. We have you on our dial number.
Thanks.
Yes. In terms of whether it's more difficult than other land animals, as Carrie has mentioned, it's not as familiar for a lot of consumers why we're working on seafood, or especially shrimp. People is like, there's so much shrimp everywhere, it's cheap, but they don't really, especially maybe because the shrimp farms are not located in a lot of where we are seeing, like Singapore, Hong Kong, we don't have the shrimp farms. But in a lot of these places where it's intensive commercial farming, the conditions are really poor. And especially with global warming, I don't know how you guys feel, but it's pretty hot out there. All this is bringing more and more viral and disease issues to these sea animals we try to pack and farm all together. Unfortunately, it's not something we can do. We can't drain out the ocean and clean it up. But if we use cell-based technology, we can separate it out in a different system. And like Elaine said, this is the best way to make sashimi, because you have no of this mercury, microplastics. You don't have to worry about the microorganisms that might be there because it's completely clean. So this is a really exciting place to be at. We're very happy to be working on crustaceans, and happy to have known Elaine for quite a long time now since we started.
Oh, I am the very happy one because I get to try these products, be the first to try these products. Such an honor, and this is the best part of my job, really. And you mentioned talking about, yes, these technologies have been applied in medicine for a long time. And you talk about saving life. And to be honest, this is creating the future of food is also saving life, right? Because the population keeps growing. We know that the demand for protein keeps growing, and we already know that there is no way we can fulfill that demand, satisfy that demand with how we are producing food at the moment. So I said with you ladies before, I'm so honored to be able to kind of host this panel, because to have a panel of women creating the future of food. You're creating food not from a kitchen, but from the lab, and you're feeding like way more people than you could ever feed, from cooking from your kitchen. And this is such a feminist move. Like, I'm loving this panel. So thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Also, the part of diversification that we see, even just represented by the three of you, is pretty amazing. So I want to kind of move on and talk a little bit about the bottleneck or the biggest challenges in small ag. We covered that a little bit I was talking with Yuki a little earlier today. So cost and infrastructure, everyone is talking about this, that being the bottleneck of cell ag. I know that all of you, why sort of I love all of the companies, it's also because you're not just kind of chasing one hero end product. You are, taking many different angles to work this, the B2B angles and working with corporates, etc. So maybe we'll start with Fengru. You're working the ingredient angle, as you mentioned just now, and supplying to corporates like the big brands. How do you see these partnerships help your business grow faster, or help you with, for instance, regulatory approval and exporting what you're doing?
Sure. So when we look at the dairy industry as a whole, it's massive. It's $700 billion, and it's not something that a startup can do on our own. I've seen what a dairy plant looks like. One of these things costs $800 million. It's really big, and we want to be able to focus on what we're good at, which is in R&D and creating the technology around cell-based milk. So if we want this powerful technology to be used across multiple geographical, we need to be able to work with industry. Not to mention that if we have our own product, if we have our own plant, we will be seen as competitors, and they'll find ways to kill us off or snuff us out. So we need to be able to work with industry. So we want to partner with them. We want to work with the Nestle, the Danons, the Unilevers to enable them to source food through our methods. And we focus more on a B2B licensing and royalty model. And this allows us to plug directly into their existing supply chains, their existing, say, packing lines, their supply chains and logistics, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. If a cheese maker is sourcing ingredients from certain providers in a certain manner, either it's powdered or it's in a fluid form, we want to plug right in so they don't have to get a new set of equipment. We want to be able to plug right in and allow them to continue their operations and making the beautiful cheeses that they make. On top of that, these companies that I mentioned, they have massive teams of regulatory, of consumer insights. So we want to be able to partner with them to tap onto their knowledge, because within each geographical location, say, if we want to launch a product in Hong Kong, Singapore, and say Vietnam, all of them are different markets, and we want to be able to tap onto their existing to go to market in these markets.
Yeah, that is super amazing. Like as we talk about like all through this summit, right? I do personally definitely have a bias with like B2B companies and sort of companies and visionaries that are looking at building whole infrastructure and platform business. I think we all ought to kind of move and into that kind of bigger picture thinking, right? As the sector grows and if we want to go mainstream. So I want to move on to ask Carrie, like you're looking to partner with Integra Culture that we talked to earlier today. Can you tell us more about like that partnership and how that's going to help Shiok scale up faster?
Yeah, happy to share about that. We're very happy to be working with Yuki and the Integra Culture group. I mean, this community at GFI and the cell-based community has brought us together. I think it's very important that all the cell-based companies kind of work together as much as we can. Like Fengru said, it's kind of really difficult for all of us to each build everything on our possible. I mean, we need people to help supply us with the media components. We need help with the scaling up and the equipment side. These are all very expensive. Within agriculture, we're working to license and use their CalNet system, basically a platform technology. It's really amazing how they think out of a box, trying to mimic organs in our living bodies in bioreactors, and that you can use that. It makes sense. I mean, our body produces what we need to keep us healthy and help us grow. So now we're just putting them all into little tanks and vessels so they can support each other. So I'm really excited that we have been working with them and look forward to partnerships like that. I think being at, conferences like this, we get to meet more and more new companies starting up. There's a lot of people working on the media side and innovating on the bioreactor side. And it's difficult for each of us to raise sufficient money on our own and to prove and get to market, because basically what we all want is a better future for clean and sustainable food. So to work together has been a great opportunity, even on the small scale where all of us are just starting out, and even some people who are still in the academic lab side as well.
Yeah, someone just Ritu just said collaboration is the way to move forward, and I think that's been like a constant theme all through this summit. Like every kind of session, it comes down to, yes, collaboration is the key. Collaboration is what we need to go forward with this and move this forward. So this is awesome. I want to ask Carrie about your experience in maybe going into these partnerships and maybe working with corporates. How has that been?
Yes, indeed, we are have been in communication with a couple of corporations, like industry players related to the ingredient and the product that we produce, working with them. I think in general, the collaboration with industry, it is really the term that it is more like a MBA elective class that I attended. It is about corporate entrepreneurship. And I think for both sides of the equation, for the startup, we would like to work with industry player because they know a lot about the market demand, what their market is interested, and also, of course, the distribution channel would be very helpful for startup. On the other hand, a lot of existing company, of course, are coming up with new innovative products, product lines. They will definitely help the company to catch more market segment, like a bigger catch of the potential customers and consumers out there. So that's definitely win-win. However, in the I think in experience that there's usually two different kind of background of people, I would say. Startup people, entrepreneur like me, Carrie, and Fengru here, we're actually like Qing Dynasty soldier. So what do they have? They have a logo in front of their outfit saying bravery. So, but for corporation, they do have they have a very clear return ROI to the investors and everything. So in a way, they're relatively more risk averse than definitely startup. However, they're very classic case. Like I still remember the business case that when I studied, that was about 3M. Each manager, they would have a time dedicated to come up with new projects idea. I think the other case is Ben and Jerry, etc. And so I think corporate, I understand that there are also a lot of drive and interest in coming up with new idea and corporate entrepreneurship, really in-house entrepreneurship. I think that can be expanded to more like it is an open answer. I don't have an answer, but I think that definitely will be very beneficial to have a system or platform in place whereby like startup can have like share the idea and also let them know what are the options, like the new solution out there for the corporate. And corporate would also have the opportunity to interact. And in our perspective, we find that we do need to be one more step further than just doing our own technology. We also, along at the time, we find it more effective in the communication to come up with some innovation and product idea, because we know very well what our technology can do, while the other person on the other side of the table may not know exactly 100% what we can do, nor do we know what is the need of the business need or the strategy or the intended direction of the company would like to achieve, and whether we can achieve something by working together. I think that is something that definitely can develop further business case and come up with some strategy. Like in the past, there will be like blue ocean strategy. There will be other strategy that can instill this idea of a more creative framework that allow the startup to work with industry. I think that is how general society would also mature, because when we have startup idea or solution, it needs to really get to the point of full-scale commercialization, and then it evolve further in terms of the technological advancement of society. So that's getting a little bit philosophical, but I think that is something that could be interesting as something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Time-wise, I realized that I really need to jump into Q&A because there are a lot of questions here. And it actually flows very nicely from what Kerry talked about, the communication amongst industry players to understand each other, and then, find out where the opportunities to tap into and grow this together. So there is one question from the audience that's about, okay, let me read this out. Back in 2019, 5 cultivated companies with Just, Memphis, Dreamers, Boon and Lu, Pork and Good announced a group that is the Alliance for Meat, Poultry and Seafood Innovation. How do you think about this collaborative effort from both the tech collaboration and also regulation perspective? What's your opinion on a similar alliance in Asia, if possible, and what we should focus in Asia? Okay, who wants to take that on first?
Me. Yes, I've reached out to these people, but they are really focused on the North American market. I want I would love to have a similar setup here in Asia. So that group is really those few companies that were mentioned, and they're driving the regulations in the US together, because there's a lot of similarities between the meat companies. So we would love to have a similar setup here in Asia, where we can to collectively work with SFA, A-Star, ESG, to have things like shared facilities, shared media development, all the really cool stuff that we don't have to do ourselves, and we can really decrease the cost and share all these things.
I think that's going on to my to-do list then.
Definitely.
Yeah, we would love to be able to support that. What do you think, Carrie?
Yeah, I think it's definitely good. I mean, I think all of us and GFI and a lot of small groups are doing it on our own ways. And this is one of the first big efforts to bring people together already. And we're starting great conversations. I think physically it will be harder for the different countries to work together on regulations. But I think having a available platform for us to consistently share updates on the framework. SFA has been very open, and they have the guidelines on there. It would be very interesting to see what it's like in other countries as well. We ourselves are, we were looking around for regulation consultants to work with, but all of them are based in US or Europe. And then they try and commission people from Asia to look into the local areas. So if anyone around here are interested to help us coordinate and share information of what they know about, cell-based meats or even alternative meats in other parts of Asia, would be really interesting. I think it will help everyone to bring the conversation forward. And like Fengru mentioned, shared facilities, maybe not each country has to have their own of everything. They could have maybe expertise on bioreactors in Japan and media in Singapore or cell lines here. I mean, I think we should all try and consolidate what we can share. I think that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of highlighted a very important issue is that Asia market is just, there are so many countries, so many different jurisdictions in what is called Asia. This is definitely not one market, one industry, right? And there is no harmonization like in the case of EU, where you have kind of shared currency and the legal structure and system, etc. It's just so fragmented. And for someone like a startup to walk into this, like, how do I deal with this diverse Asian market that people just lump it together? It's very difficult. And someone like we talked about it a little bit before that from the regulatory perspective, this is also how a partnership with corporate can actually really help, because they have that regulatory expertise in going into so many different Asian markets. Like they have a whole team of in-house experts. That's what I found. Like the gap of this regulatory expert, right? It's because they're all in-house, like in these big corporates.
Yeah, that's right. The thing is, I think we can go on a multi-pronged approach. It doesn't have to be kind of one track. If we go to the corporates, it would be just focused on our own industries. But the whole cell ag tech or cell-based industry as a whole, we could approach this as a collective. From that point of view, I guess we could have a bigger across different jurisdictions or even groups, right? In Asia, we have ASEAN. In North Asia, there might be other groups as well. So there are different ways that we can approach this.
Yeah, Carrie, do you have anything to add to this question?
I think that by joining together, that definitely offer a lot of intelligence. I think one of the common line that we all face is about the regulation and legislation. And if we put ourselves in the shoes of the regulators, first of all, there need to be sufficient samples and data point, so that the one thing that they want to make sure that risks are actually managed, captured and managed on behalf of the public. On the other hand, I think if I'm a regulator, I don't want to over-regulate nor under-regulate. So in order to get enough like case study, data point and samples, and how this technology actually used in multiple ways, and what are the solutions out there, and what are the potential risks out of these different solutions, is actually quite important in order to come up with like a very balanced kind of regulatory framework. And I think that in a way that this alliance, I totally support that, and anything like I would definitely contribute, and in a way that help as well. This alliance, I think that is really helping them to help us in return. When we have a legislation that is constructive and also benefiting the public, as well as in terms of the timeline that help with that is benefiting ourselves in return. So I totally support that.
Yeah. I'm actually super optimistic about this, the fact that we are all in Asia, because for instance, the Singapore government is super progressive with this, like really working alongside startups, like from a very early stage to understand what's going on. As Carrie said, right, the regulators need to understand the process and the progress of the sector, get data points to get themselves comfortable, and to get their head around like how much do they want to regulate this. And I think this is actually a really good environment to be in Asia, especially in Singapore and in Japan, like places like that where the regulators are really keeping a very open mind in terms of these products. Great, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is about investors. So the question is, how do you balance working with investors to return ROI while also getting them to understand the longer runway required to get cultivated new products to market? Yeah, I think let's get to that question. One question. Who wants to take that?
Sure. The investors that would invest in this space would be very educated in the deep tech space. So the deep tech space is very focused on IP and R&D and coming up with new innovations. We're not building a product, going to market and be done with it. Yeah. We are really an R&D focused industry we're continuously improving ourselves, continuously finding ways to add more different ingredients, improve the output, improve the yield. So there is the runway is not just a little longer, but it's also always iterating. There is no end to the R&D. It's forever improving. So that's my point. It's about getting the right investors on board who believes that technology is how this is supposed to be, where it's always iterating.
How you experience with investors?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to add on to what Fengru said. It's important to be able to match, I guess, in some ways with investors who are mission aligned, that they believe there is a bigger picture than to have a return of investment. I mean, these people who have started our journey and have walked with us so far, they have to be able to be and have been very patient. In some ways, we call it patient money. They're not people who are as used to, you know, okay, I'm going to put in and you guys are going to be IPO in 2 to 3 years and I'll get my money back. I mean, they really want to see, for us, especially, you know, improvement in the ocean. You know, we're not going to add to pollution. There should be a better improvement in sustainability. So I think, you know, that's the other good thing, that, you know, the community is relatively small and people are able to share their technology, what they do. Like Fengru said, you know, we improve continuously. We all try to have unique ways that we're doing things and we patent it. And that's kind of the strongest thing for the cell-based markets to start, until you really, because usually you'll see, you know, how much users do you have, how many people are buying your products, but for us, we're not commercial yet, and that's not really possible. So to be able to share what we see in the future, in the 10 years, 20 years, what we see as a bigger picture, what we're working towards, is very important.
Yeah, the longer runway is really, so this is why sort of in Nearby, like we try to cultivate that as well as to educate investors, right? Because if you don't have those investors with really a long-term thinking and thinking, again, the bigger picture, right? It's not about like, where is it going to get to market? It is such a bigger game plan, and there are many different points that you can tap into in the value chain. And so to get investors that can really collaborate with you and really partner with you through a long journey. Also, like for investors to not look at this as a food company, right? I think when we're in you mentioned, this is an R&D company, like compared to a normal like food company, F&B company, the amount of money required, resources required to go into R&D, like you can't really value that as it's not an apple to apple comparison, comparing a cultivated meat company with a F&B company, which spends very little on R&D in general. What do you think about this, Carrie? What's your experience with the investors?
Yeah, I totally agree with what has been mentioned here. And I think for investor point of view, it's very obvious. The principle is always like higher risk, higher return. And in this case, it's actually longer time to revenue means higher entry barrier. That means that it will not be as competitive like that quickly. So there's a very good barrier. And indeed, there are actually investor, this is a very wide spectrum. If you think about investors that would invest in drugs, some medical treatment that need to go through like clinical trial, it could be as long as 8, 9, 10 years before they get return. And I think that is really the other extreme. And it is really up to the investors' like objective of the investment. And I think for cultivated meat, it offer a very interesting sweet point, which is between like a timeline, something between a very quick to market, like 1 to 2 year, versus a like high tech like drugs, which is like 9, 10 years. But we are sitting something like almost in the middle, but with a very good like entry barrier and also access to a very big like market size, like food that is everyone would enjoy versus like drugs, which is treating a certain like disease, etc. I think this is a very interesting investment proposition if we look at that in that perspective. And and not just talking about, wow, how early do we get the like return. We think about what is the barrier and what are the long-term dividend coming out from investing in this technology.
Yeah. So a follow-up question on that from the audience. So are investors looking at, if not, when you can get this to market? Is regulatory approval a kind of the milestone that you see investors wanting you to hit?
So investors are definitely concerned about regulations because that is the biggest thing that is holding a lot of these technologies to go to market. Technology is there, it's possible to scale it, but the regulators we need to make sure that it's safe for consumption, right? For us, I think we are definitely leading with regulations. We have 6 different teams now in TurtleTree, and one of them is regulatory approvals, and we're working with SFA and FDA closely on that. Our investors recognize this is one of the things that we need to focus on. At the same time, it's not that bad. I mean, if you think about it, there are a lot of leaders in this space. We have Memphis Meats, we have Blue Nalu, who are really helping to push the forefront of this entire space. On top of that, there are also companies like Beyond and Impossible. I know you're not in the cell-based food space, but they are really helping us to educate the entire market to understand the impact of what we're trying to do and the sustainability angle of novel food tech. So we're not the first ones who will go to market. We're not the first ones who are talking to the regulators. So there is a lot of interest in this space, and I'm sure collectively we can make a difference.
I think to add on to what Fengru said, regulations indeed is a concern, but because we're not already ready to commercialize, that's not their highest priority. I think for a lot of them, at least from my experience, cost is one of the biggest, because at the end it's food. Consumers can't afford to buy expensive products every day for daily consumption. And I think one of the benefits of being in Asia and in Singapore in particular is, the market you select. Being in Singapore, regulations have been very open and very interested to get the alternative meats into the market. So that is really, a strong point. If we were targeting, let's say, Europe, that might be a bit more hesitant because that is a lot bigger and more difficult to go through, I would say, even more than US in the long run.
Yeah, it does seem so. Carrie?
Yeah, I do echo with that. I think maybe for a few of us here, like the idea of just in time, that we are really reaching the commercial, like industrial scale when we think about the time the legislation will be like, if not already ready, very close to ready. So the just in time will quite work very well in our timeline as well. That's what we see, what we think.
Awesome. I just realized we're completely going over time already. It's not a pleasure to put together this session and talking to the 3 of you. Every single time is really inspiring, and like to have all of you together, in one session is really awesome. I would love if you could wrap up this session with an inspiring message to, I don't know, maybe a young girl who wants to be a scientist someday, to start her own startup. Should we go around? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Go ahead, Carrie.
No, go please, Fengru.
All right. So I watched a movie recently about Edison, and when he invented the light bulb, he told the world only the rich will use candles to light up the dark. And I believe in the future, only rich people or crazy people will get food and meat from animals. The rest of the world would get it from cell-based methods.
I think for me, I think one of the big things is that, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. before I started this 2 years ago, I was like, nah, I'm never gonna join a startup, even just, to work there. And look, 2 years later, we've started the company and we have a great team. And, no matter what your background is, as long as you know in the long run what is the big picture you're looking for, you can assemble the right people and bring a team together and work towards a better future. So that's what my thoughts are.
Yay!
I think just do whatever you think that worth spending your time, and just go ahead and do it. And I totally agree. And when you have the very focused energy and zeal in doing something, I think things actually, in our case, it's actually sometimes I find it's quite magical. Sometimes things just happen, and if you're very dedicated to that, it will happen. So just take the first step.
Oh, this is so inspiring. Thank you so much. And it's been such an honor really to be sort of on the side, going through bits and pieces of this journey with all of you amazing women here. This is the best way to kind of end the summit. We're gonna do a group photo with us waving goodbye to the audience. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.